So we're going to start with a setup. So like any classic story, you have to introduce your protagonist, your antagonist. You have to introduce the setting. You have to introduce the conflict. And so to do that, we're going to start with the self-titled NF EP. So this came out before all the albums. This had like 5 songs on it. And the first song we're going to look at, or there's 2 songs on the EP we're going to look at. That's All I Have and Just Being Me. I think these 2 songs do the best job of introducing us to the protagonist of this story. And so NF in later albums just refers to this character as Nate. So we're gonna also call him Nate. Now Nate, NF's actual name is Nathan. So Nate works just fine. All right, so the protagonist. Let's get to the protagonist. So looking at All I Have, let's look at let's look at the important lines in All I Have. So here it is. All I Have. I came in the game as a lyricist, and I'm gonna leave like that. Period. You sniff lines, I write lines. You've now entered in my mind, and you better get ready, because you might find I'm from a different place, and my kind, it's a little bit different than yours is. And then later in the song, he goes, what do you think I write raps for? No reason? No. I take my pain and I put them in a song. Ever since them pills, they took my mom. I've been a different person. Don't try to predict my verses. What you're hearing now is me, whether I'm in front or behind that curtain. I stand behind these words. I'm a Christian, but I'm not perfect. Alright, so now let's go to Just Being Me. And here's the final. Here are the last final lines that I think introduce this NF protagonist. This is in the second verse of Just Being Me. Since I was a kid, I had a dream that I would make it. I spent thousands of hours writing music in the basement. Even though I'm broke, you know why I still chase it? Because once you got a taste of it, there's no replacement. I don't rap so millions of people will like me. I rap because there's millions of people just like me. If you think I'm out of my mind, I ain't gonna argue. I might be. But I'm not on a stage just for people to sightsee. So what do we see about this protagonist, Nate? All right, so we see 5 things. 1, he's a Christian. 2, he writes about his life, pains and all. 3, he lost his mom to pills. 4, he had a dream as a kid to be a rapper and worked very hard on it, right? He said he wrote for thousands of hours. And the last reason, he writes because there's people just like him that he wants to connect to. So now we got our first character. We got our protagonist. Now let's go to NF's first album and look at the song Mansions. Okay? And let's meet the setting and the protagonist. So the chorus of the first song goes... The chorus of the first song is going to tell us exactly where this is taking place. This is going to set up the whole scene for us, set up where this entire story happens. So this is Mansion. My mind is a home I'm trapped in, and it's lonely inside this mansion. Okay, so the whole story is going to take place inside basically his own mind, his mansion. Okay, which he describes later in the song that the mansion, the walls in the mansion are covered in lyrics. There are songs in the mirrors and the floors and in the chairs. This is the mansion where you get to see the rawest form of Nate. Okay, you get to see how he copes with his issues, and you see how he's going to talk about different problems in his life. And here he does an interesting thing in the song where he gives each sort of problem its own room, right? That this is its own corner of his mind where it exists in. He mentions 4 different problems that he deals with. First is physical abuse, regret, complacency, anger. And each of these rooms, and this is the interesting part, right? Each of these rooms, Nate is incredibly comfortable with bringing us, his audience, into it. He doesn't sound distressed. He doesn't sound panicked or embarrassed that they're there. He talks very, very calmly, matter-of-factly about what each of these rooms means to him, how he struggled with them. But the last verse of the song, he brings us to another room. A room that he says he doesn't let anyone into. And he admits that he's emotionally scared to bring people into this room, and he tells us exactly why. So here's later, the last verse in Mansions. So I just leave my doors locked. You might get other doors to open up, but this door's not. Because I don't want you to have the opportunity to hurt me. And I'll be the only person I can blame when you desert me. And after he says that, he basically starts panicking. Okay? He says he's barricaded inside the mansion. He's lost in his own conscience. That he's trapped himself in the mansion. And he also says that he did this not because he thought it was going to solve any problems. Right? Shutting the world out wasn't... The point of shutting the world out wasn't so that it could solve problems. He did it because he thought it was safer. And the idea here is that sometimes we isolate ourselves from our friends and our families because doing that is much easier than actually dealing with the problem that's tearing us apart inside. And honestly, I greatly relate to that idea. I mean, I can say that because I've done that before, and it's incredibly unhealthy. But here is where we're going to meet the antagonist after that line, all right? I built it because I thought it would be safer in there, but it's not. I'm not the only thing living in here. Fear came to my house years ago. I let him in. Maybe that's the problem, because I've been dealing with this ever since. I thought that he would leave, but it's obvious he never did. He must have picked the room and got comfortable and settled in. Now I'm in a position, it's either sit here and let him win or put him back outside where he came from, but I never can. Because in order to do that, I'd have to open the doors. Is that me or the fear talking? I don't know anymore. So who's our antagonist? It's the personification of fear. And here's what we're told about him. We're told that he came years ago and never left. Right? He doesn't want to leave. Nate can't or won't open the door to kick him out of the mansion. And now Nate can't figure out who's the one who's really in charge. Is it himself being Nate? Or is it himself being fear? Right? So now let's look at the next song that's going to explain what the conflict is between Nate and fear. What's the issue? What's the problem? What is fear doing to Nate that's an issue? So here's Paralyzed. When did I become so numb? When did I lose myself? All the words that leave my tongue feel like they came from someone else. I'm paralyzed. Where are my feelings? I no longer feel things I know I should. I'm paralyzed. Where is the real me? I'm lost and it kills me inside. I'm paralyzed. I'm scared to live, but I'm scared to die. And if life is pain, then I buried mine a long time ago. But it's still alive. And it's taking over me. Where am I? I want to feel something. I'm numb inside. But I feel nothing. I wonder why. I'm on the race of life and time passes by. Look, I sit back and I watch it. Hands in my pocket. Waves come crashing over me, but I just watch them. I just watch them. I'm underwater, but I feel like I'm on top of it. I'm at the bottom, and I don't know what the problem is. I'm in a box, but I'm the one who locked me in, suffocating, and I'm running out of oxygen. So fear, the conflict here is that fear has isolated Nate so much so that he's becoming numb, right? He can't escape fear, but he understands that fear is the one that's killing him from the inside. And if it's killing you from the inside, eventually it's going to start killing you on the outside, okay? So Nate understands that I have to escape. So there's your conflict. There's the whole setup. But let's ask the question, why fear? Why is fear the antagonist? What makes him what makes him the antagonist? I mean, let's look at some of the other problems that filled the mansion that Nate talked about, okay? He talked about regret. He talked about complacency. He talked about anger. He talked about physical abuse. Why were none of those the antagonist of this story? I mean, they're certainly good candidates. And also, something to consider, there's a healthy type of fear, right? There's a type of fear that keeps you from doing something stupid. There's the type of fear that allows you to see the train coming down the track and you knowing you need to get off the train tracks. Okay? There's that type of fear. So why are we choosing fear? Well, I honestly can't tell you why the man, NF, the actual person, chose fear for his story. through his music. But I can tell you why fear is certainly a formidable adversary and a well-deserved choice for the antagonist of this story. So Jordan Peterson, who is a clinical psychologist and a doctor, gave a lecture at FUS. That's Franciscan University of Steubenville, university I'm sure every one of us definitely knew. Okay, but I think this lecture at FUS is going to answer why fear is such a good antagonist for the story. So, in his lecture, he uses the Exodus story in the Old Testament. This is where God calls Moses and Abraham to lead the Israelites out of Egyptian captivity. Right? Pharaoh lets them leave after being plagued. After God plagues the Egyptians 10 times. For each time that Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go. Right? God didn't just do this willy-nilly. Moses asked Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. Pharaoh said no, so God punished the Egyptians. So after the Israelites escape the Egyptians by God parting the Red Sea, immediately after getting out of captivity, the Israelites find themselves in the wilderness. Okay, they find themselves in a barren wasteland. Now, being that this is, northern Africa-ish, Middle East region, most of the wilderness is basically a barren desert, right? So it's hot. They don't have any food. They don't have any water just readily available, right? They're on the run. They're fugitives at this point. Okay? So what do? They complain. They lose faith. They question not only Moses and Aaron's leadership, but they also lose faith in God, right? Saying that it would have been better for them to stay in Egyptian captivity than to die in the wilderness, right? So this is that's Exodus 14, and for the entire journey through the wilderness, basically all they do is complain and lose faith in God over and over and over again. Even after God proves, I'm going to protect you, I'm going to provide for you, they still complain, they still lose faith. Eventually, God punishes them by sending snakes to bite them. Getting sick and tired of their complaining. Because if anybody is allowed to get sick and tired, it is the most all-powerful, all-perfect, all-good being. So, Jordan says this in his lecture. What if you go from tyranny to desert? And who wants to do that? And the answer is no one with any sense. And it's like, hey, I'll just keep the tyranny, thank you very much. At least I know where everything belongs there. And fair enough. This is a serious question. It's an open question in the Exodus narrative, whether the desert is worse or better than tyranny. You see, fear likes to use the unknowable future as a weapon against us to keep us paralyzed, right? And Nate says as much back in the song Mansion. So let's look back at that line. Now I'm in a position. It's either sit here and let him win, or put him back outside where he came from, but I never can. Because in order to do that, I'd have to open the doors. Now, what happens when you open the doors, Nate? And I think Nate back in 2015 would have said, hey, good question. And fear would have said the exact same thing, and that's the point, right? Fear's answer is to paralyze you. Fear's answer is to keep you in the suck and let you rot away. Because, and this is the kicker, because it could always get worse if you try something else. That's fear's answer. So Jordan goes on. But you think, well, even if you're in the desert after a tyranny and you lose faith, then the snakes are going to bite you, right? Because that's what happens. Because if you're in a little analog of hell, that being the desert. If you're in a little analog of hell and you lose your faith, is that going to make it better or worse? And your answer is, I have a reason to lose my faith. And well, fair enough, but that isn't the question. The question is, what happens if you lose it, or you start looking for faith in the wrong direction? And the answer is, hell gets a little deeper. And I just want to add this bar that he drops a little later in the lecture. So he says, I spent a lot of time studying atrocities, and one thing I realized on a metaphorical level is the reason hell is a bottomless pit is because no matter how bad it is, there's always some bloody stupid thing you can do to make it worse. And that's a terrifying realization. Amen and amen. So why is fear the antagonist? Because this type of fear, right, not the healthy type, right, that's gonna tell you not to do the stupid thing. This type of fear isn't gonna fix Nate's problems. All it does, all this type of fear is doing is multiplying his existing problems into even worse problems, right? His anger, multiplying it into even worse anger. Regret, it gets even worse, right? The complacency gets even worse. Whatever effects from his traumas of physical abuse gets even worse. That's what fear is doing. That's why it's such an effective antagonist. So let's look at the conflict now, okay? If you haven't, so before we go any further, if you haven't already, hit the like button, please. Subscribe. That would really help us out. If you find this content valuable, subscribe. Help it grow. So let's continue to the conflict. So what does Nate do? Right? Is he just screwed? No, I don't think so. At least not yet. Right? If you stay stuck in the rut, then yeah, eventually you're gonna get screwed. All right. So let's jump to his album called Therapy Session and see how Nate tries to fight back against the fear. Okay. So the first way, we're gonna look at the song Therapy Session. The first way he does this is by actually showing us, revealing what the stakes are that he's playing for with fear. Okay, what are the stakes to this fight? What are the stakes if I lose? What consequences happen? So here we go. This is a Therapy Session. Yeah, I got off the stage like a month ago. I was talking to fans, and one of them pulled me aside and said, "We've never met, but I swear that you know who I am. I've been through a lot. I don't know how to express it to people. Don't think that I can. But I got that Mansion CD on rotation. That's real for me, man. That's real for me, Nate. You do not understand." So at this point, right, Therapy Session, now Nate has a dedicated fan base that has connected to his work. Okay? And I was, at this time, right, 2015, or 2016 actually, I was one of these fans that deeply connected to his work. But this kind of responsibility, the responsibility of having people who admire you, people who look up to you, people who are listening to your every word, looking for advice, that kind of responsibility comes with a lot of pressure. Okay? And I don't know if a lot of artists understand that sort of admiration pressure from fans. But here's how Nate puts it himself about dealing with that pressure. These kids, they come to my shows with tears in their eyes. Imagine someone looking at you and saying your music's the reason that they are alive. Sometimes I don't know how to handle it. This type of life isn't glamorous. This ain't an act for the cameras. You see me walk on these stages, but have no idea what I'm dealing with after it. I put it all in the open. This is the way that I cope with all my emotion. I'm taking pictures with thousands of people, but honestly, I feel like nobody knows me. I'm trying to deal with depression. I'm trying to deal with the pressure. How you gonna tell me my music does not have a message when I'm the one looking out at this crowd of people I know I've affected? So here's Nate's strategy, right, to dealing with his emotions. It's by putting it all out there, putting his pain, putting his heart, wearing his heart on his sleeves, and letting all of us, his audience, see his pain. Okay? Doing this helps Nate to stop being paralyzed by fear. This is how he's able to start moving, right? To stop being in one spot, to stop being numb, right? If I share my pain with people, then I feel it, then I'm not being numb to my emotions anymore. Now I get to kind of deal with some of these things that I should have addressed a long time ago. And by doing this, he's also connecting with the very same people he wanted to connect with in Just Being Me, back in the NF EP, his first EP, right? Or one of his EPs. The people that are just like him, that are stuck. And Nate puts this strategy to the test in a very real way when he writes his most emotional, easily his most emotional and raw song called "How Could You Leave Us." So, if you remember back to what we were learning about our protagonist, we talked about how he lost his mother to pills, right? So I want to share only one portion of the song because I do think that you should just listen to the song to get the best idea of just the kind of emotion NF's putting into this song. So here's the portion of the song that I think is going to at least best encapsulate what I'm talking about. So here we go. Crying my eyes out in the studio is difficult. Music is the only place that I can go to speak to you. It took everything inside of me not to scream at your funeral. Sitting in my chair, that person talking was pitiful. I wish you were here, Mama, but every time I picture you, all I feel is pain. I hate the way I remember you. So, when I was younger, I had to go through some counseling, okay? And I highly recommend it if it's something you need. You should get it. The best encouragement that I ever heard to go get counseling was so it was put like this. It's weird that we'll pay all kinds of money to get our cars tuned up, but we can't fathom the idea of needing to work on your mind when it's falling apart. So for me, my parents got divorced when I was around 8 or 9, and at some point I needed help to work through it. I needed help to deal with the effects of that divorce, right? And my counselor at the time saw in me that I was hanging on to some kind of emotion from that divorce. It was an emotion that I was hanging on to and ignoring, and I needed to acknowledge it. I needed to bring it out in the open, bring it out in the light, right? The darkness gets destroyed by the light. So I needed to bring this out into the light. And for me, what that emotion was me being angry that my parents got divorced. And for Nate, the thing he needs to say that's not being said, the thing he needed to say, the thing he needed to bring out in the light was how bitter he was at his mom. Let's look at the last two lines again, right? I wish you were here, Mama, but every time I picture you, all I feel is pain. I hate the way I remember you. This song is filled with a man who's bitter, a man who's broken, who's mourning the loss of his mom, but who's also bitter at the way she left. See, we were never made to lock this kind of stuff inside of us. James 5 talks about us needing to confess our sins to one another, and Galatians 6 talks about us needing to bear each other's burdens. We weren't made to do this life alone. Even if you're not a Christian, right? You still need a support group around you. You still need people to pick you up when you drop to the floor. Life's just too difficult and too hard to do by yourself. When we isolate ourselves, it's then that we end up driving ourselves off cliffs. So now Nate, at this point, after How Could You Leave Us, right? After therapy session, at this point, he's starting to deal with all those problems. He's starting to do the right thing, starting to build momentum in the right direction. So now let's look at the last song on the album, where we get to see Nate and Fear have their first conversation on a song together. And it's really fitting that the album cover for the therapy session album is Nate in a white shirt on the left, sitting in a chair, facing Fear, who's in a black hoodie, black cap, slouched in his chair like he doesn't want to be there. I think it's a very fitting album cover. So, here's Fear's first line in the song "Lost in the Moment." You got a problem with following through. That's why I got a problem with following you. You keep looking at me like this problem is new, but we've been here before. What you trying to do? Don't talk to me like I don't know what you're feeling, because I was there with you back in the beginning. Quit looking away when I talk. Let me finish. I'm trying to be honest. You're trying to forget me. So here's Nate's response. Joy. When was the last time we had it? I don't remember, because all that we do is go backwards. But that's what you get when you live in the past. And I know we're breathing, but we're not alive. Really, is this the way we want to die? So you got everything bottled inside. If they only knew what goes on in our minds. I know what you're thinking. Don't try to hide. Why do you look at me like you're surprised? If you really mean what you write in these lines, then why don't you fix it? Because I'm getting tired. At this point, at this song, this is the song where the battle lines are drawn. This is the song where each side knows exactly where they stand. Nate can't live with fear anymore. Nate recognizes that. I can't be around fear anymore. Right? Fear's just dragging me down like an anchor. And fear is tired of all of Nate's hand-wringing, all of Nate's second-guessing, all of Nate's pouting and whining, all of it. Fear is sick of it. And what we get after this is the first big fight between Nate and Fear. So on NF's third album, Perceptions, we get his first song, Intro 3. Okay? This is the big title match card. This is round 1 of Fear versus Nate. And Fear talks for most of this song. It's right at the end where Nate really steps in. So we're gonna see Fear here. This is Fear talking. What, are you scared of me? That's embarrassing. If it wasn't for me, you would have never wrote Therapy. Talking about therapy session. I've been here for you, but how come you're never there for me? It's a little bit twisted, but I miss when you and I had scary dreams. And then in the background, you hear Nate say, I don't really want to talk about it. And here comes Fear off the top rope. Well, that's too bad now, Nate. Shut up. Now, where were we? Way back in the day, when you and I had it all mapped out in the basement, crying in your room like a baby, and Fear does this. Fear does the crying in a room like a baby. I wish Mom was here. You can't baby talk someone in the middle of an argument. That's just asking for some problems. So let's continue. Crying in your room like a baby. I wish Mom was here. Right? And he goes, we all do. So we wouldn't have to hear about it. Every single record, you don't really want to change me. Yeah, I'm the reason that made this happen. Do you really want to get rid of your main attraction? So, I mean, Fear is just big boy in NF. Right? I think there's something that needs to be said about Fear. Okay? When you decide to fight Fear, you'd better be ready for Fear to punch back. Okay? Or whatever vice it may be, right? Drinking, drugs, whatever it is. If you're trying to rid yourself of a vice, that vice isn't just going to let you go willingly. It's going to go kicking and screaming. Right? And in this particular fight, Fear is coming out the gate like a bat out of you know where. So let's continue. Took us from a no-name, told you everything was okay. Now you trying to cut me out of it like I ain't never been a part of it. I am the heart of it. I made this whole thing. Yeah, I put us on a dope stage. You must have no brain. And later he says, you can't get rid of all of me. I'm the reason why. And finally, Nate, here comes Nate to defend himself. I'm the reason why. Here's Nate. Nah, shut up. I don't want to hear another sentence. But Fear doesn't care, right? It's Fear's just stunting like he always is. Doing the baby. Hey, I'm NF. Is it me or the Fear talking? Huh, what a dumb question. Yeah, it's real music to the day we die, right? Yeah, ain't that the slogan, Nathan? Here comes back Nate. Thought I told you to keep your mouth shut. And Fear responds with, I mean, so what? You know I never listen. I mean, look, this is just Fear doing a Dwayne The Rock Johnson on some poor jabroni in the 90s. Okay, Fear does not give two rips about Nate or his feelings or anything about Nate. Okay? So, but the setup for the end is where Nate turns the tables. In the song, Nate asks Fear where the shovel is. And then Fear asks if Nate is if Fear asks Nate if Nate's digging Fear's grave. And Nate says no. Right? And the last lines of this song are gold. You had me scared for... This is Fear saying, you had me scared for a second. I thought we were digging my grave. And in the song, you hear a clank. Just a big old clank. It's the shovel hitting the back of somebody's head. You had me scared for a second. I thought we were digging my grave. Clank. We did. What, you don't like being afraid? Here's a dose of your own medicine. What, you don't like how it tastes? My therapist told me don't bury my issues, but I'm going to be honest, man, I'm feeling great. I feel like Nate NF would be great in the WWE. Because that was a great response line. My therapist told me don't bury my issues because I'm going to be honest, man, I'm feeling great. Nate wins round 1 with Fear. And the cool thing about Perception's album, the album that Intro 3 intros, the cool thing about that album is for the rest of the album, you hear a much more comfortable, much more confident, much freer Nate than any of his previous albums. You can especially see this on songs like Outcast, No, Outro. This is a whole new Nate. This is a Nate where the chains are lifted off of him, at least briefly. And there's some of these songs where you can tell that Nate doesn't really know how to deal with this freedom yet. Doesn't really know how to be comfortable in freedom. But it's still a wonderful thing to see. It's a beautiful thing to see. What he gets a first taste of what life without fear is like. But often, like parasites, stuff like fear, vices, they just don't know how to stop. And in the final song we're going to look at today, the song's called Why. It's off the 4th album called The Search. Fear makes a comeback, makes his big unfortunate return, like the Terminator or something. And this, in starting with The Search, I think really is where the music videos start becoming so important. Right? Because now there's a visual element to Fear. In Why, Fear is dressed in literally all black now. He's got the black cap again. He's got the black sweater, black jeans. He's got a black Joker paint smile on him. Okay, he's got black balloons that represent all of Nate's burdens that he carries around in a shopping cart, almost as like a sick joke that here's your prison you just get to carry now with all your burdens. What I love about Why, and you can see this even in the flow, right, of the song, in the flow of some of how NF raps. Parts of the song sound like someone is being forced to say something they don't actually believe, right? And in the song, you get to kind of see glimpses of Fear again popping his ugly head out. So let's look at some of these lines, right? And notice, at least in these first 3, how Fear pokes his head out. So here we go. Stop asking me questions. I just want to feel alive until I die. This isn't Nate's flow. Just let me rhyme. I'm in disguise. Who's in disguise? All right. He says this isn't Nate's flow. Who's in disguise? Just let me rhyme. It's Fear. Fear's back. And he's in control for this song. And he's saying lies again. Here's 2 more lines. I don't care what anybody else thinks, lies. And in the background when he says that, you just hear a ha-ha. Ha-ha. The song's pretty ominous, actually. Like it's pretty scary. I don't need nobody to help me, lies. The person saying the word lies is Nate, right? Fear's taking control. So Nate now has to be the guy that has to come in the background and say, no, that's not true. I do care what people think. I do need people to help me. Right? So though he's much less pronounced than before, right? He's much less pronounced than in Mansions, much less pronounced than in Lost in the Moment, much less pronounced than in Intro 3. Nate has to deal with this problem again. Nate, and on it, all of us at points in our life when we beat a vice, right? We win. It's gone for a time. We get to live peacefully. We get to live freely for a little bit, and then we slip up, and here comes the vice coming back again, and we got to ride that merry-go-round all over again, one more time. But this time for Nate, I believe is different. This time for Nate, I think the outcome and the motivations of why he needs to beat fear are going to change. In the song Why, we saw that this was fear's return back into Nate's life. And we're now going to talk about what fear's return means for Nate. So let's look back at Why to see fear's mission now that he's returned. So let's read. This is fear talking. Yeah, what's your definition of success? I don't trust the thoughts that come inside my head. I don't trust this thing that beats inside my chest. Who I am and who I want to be cannot connect. So what's fear's mission here? We see that fear's mission is to keep Nate from trusting his instincts and his thoughts, to keep Nate from becoming the man that he wants to be. And why does fear want to do this? It's because fear wants to keep Nate dependent on himself, on fear. So this brings us to the beginning of the Search album. And we're going to start with two songs, the songs The Search and Change. And what we find in these two songs is that after beating fear back in Intro 3 in the Perception album, and after fear's return back in Why after Perception, we find that Nate is at rock bottom. And we're going to look at this, we're going to read from the song The Search to hear from Nate. So here's The Search. Hey Nate, how's life? I don't know. It's alright. I've been dealing with some things like every human being and really didn't sleep much last night. He continues, last year I had a breakdown, thoughts telling me I'm lost getting too loud. Had to see a therapist and I found out something funny's going on up in my house. So if you remember back in part 1, the house that Nate's referring to is the mansion inside of his head. The mansion that represents Nate's mind, right? The mansion is the setting of this story. But who's Nate talking to here, right? We look at the first line, hey Nate, how's life? Who's talking to Nate there? I believe we're being introduced to a new character in this story, but we're going to table that for right now until this character reveals himself fully a little later. In the meantime, let's look at the song Change. So let's hear Nate. See, all my emotions are liars. All my emotions are violent. They don't want freedom to find me. Mention that name and everyone riots. That name being freedom. That's why I'm checking my vitals. They keep on working, but I know. Breathing don't mean you're alive, so I back up all of my trash and walk out on my tightrope. Positive thoughts are my rivals. I'm trying to be on their side, though. Should I feel comfortable? I don't. Last year, I felt suicidal. So where's Nate been in between the Perception album and the Search album? Well, we can tell that in between these two albums, Nate has had a mental breakdown. His emotions, fear, anger, pride, they're all keeping freedom away from them. Even rioting at the mention of freedom's name. We also know that he's been suicidal. So Nate is at the lowest point in this journey. Okay, he's lower than where he started. And Nate will tell us why he's here. In the interlude, halfway through this album, it's really more of an interview style of a song. He's just talking in the mic in the studio. So let's hear what Nate has to say, why he's at rock bottom. He says, my most considered successful moment of my life was the worst. The most depressed I've ever been. Literally feeling like I'd probably be happier if I was just dead. I got a number one song on a billboard. My song is massive right now. I may never have a song this big again. My tour, I think every date sold out except one date. So literally, everything that I'd always dreamed of happening, and I felt I didn't feel happy at all. And so I think what happened was I spiraled really bad. Because I was like, I'm here. And if this is it, there's got to be more for me. Because if this is it, it's not going to work. So we see that Nate has bet all his emotional and mental progress on his music, believing that if he gains some level of success in his musical career, that he'll be able to heal. That success would heal him. But he finds that it doesn't work. So what's he do? Well, at rock bottom, he does the only thing he can do. He seeks outside help. He's found that he can't do this thing alone. He doesn't try to fight this battle alone, and he goes to a therapist. So we talked about on Wednesday how we can't do this fight alone. We weren't made to do this fight alone. The therapist gives Nate the answers that he's looking for, the answers to fix the problem. And it involves Nate finally leaving the mansion. So let's look again at the search to see what Nate's talking about. So here's Nate. I've been searching. Well, what does that mean, Nate? I've been learning. Grabbing my keepsakes, leaving my burdens. Well, I bought a few with me, because I'm not perfect. And he later says, it's worth it, though. Cold world out there, kids. Grab your coats. Been a minute, I know, now I'm back to Rome, looking for the antidote to crack the code. I'm looking for the map to hope. You seen it? So now we see that Nate's on the move, okay? He was at rock bottom. He sought help. He got help. And now, he's on the journey out of the valley. Okay? Towards what? We look at that last line, I'm looking for the map to hope. He's moving towards Hope, who we're going to get to later. Because I believe this is the new character we're being introduced to, Hope. But we'll wait to get to him. But like we've said before, if you're trying to fight fear, you need to be ready for fear to fight back. Okay? He's not just going to lay over and let you beat him. The Nate we find in the search and in change isn't the Nate from Intro 3. The Nate in Intro 3 was capable of beating fear. This Nate is a broken man who is freshly glued back together. He just saw a therapist who helped him out of the valley. And that little progress alone, just starting to walk out of the valley, fear can't allow that. Okay? So the search ends, the song The Search ends in the video, the music video of The Search ends with Nate climbing in his shopping cart, which is a representation of his cage, the cage that he locks himself in. Tied to the shopping cart are black balloons, which represent his burdens. Okay? And in the cage, he curls up into a ball. And at the end of the video, someone who's all dressed in white walks up to the cage and puts white clothes inside the cage. So now let's look at the second song on the album, Leave Me Alone, so that we can see this a second conversation between Nate and Fear. It should be noted that in the music video for Leave Me Alone, we see Fear in control here, right? Nate's just freshly out of the lowest point in his life, so he's not in control of himself. Fear is the one who's dominating Nate, and he's talking through Nate. He's dressed in all. We find Nate in the video dressed in all black with a black smile painted across his face. So let's look at Leave Me Alone. This is Fear talking. I hate when they debate if we're underrated. We're so overlooked that they're looking over our numbers, Nathan. We don't do enough interviews or go out in public lately. We don't put enough on our socials to keep the buzz from fading. So this is Fear. This is a Fear who's not satisfied with where Nate's at in his music career. Okay, if you remember back in Intro 3, Fear talked about how Fear was the one that was the heart of Nate's music career. That Fear was the main attraction. Everybody came to Nate to see Fear, not Nate. So here's Nate's response inside Leave Me Alone. Shut your mouth. Yeah, shut your mouth. Better tone it down. Close it now. If you make a sound, I'ma change the dial. Funny how they be acting loud, coming unannounced. Feel the symptoms, couldn't miss 'em, wrestle with 'em. Then I pin and flip 'em, brought some backup, no, well you should get some. Those last two lines are the key lines. Why? Because Nate's response, those last two lines indicate that now he has some backup. Now he's got people that are helping him. It's not just him alone fighting fear and the rest of Nate's emotions. So could he simply be talking about therapy? It could be. But we find one other person, who another member that's helping Nate is, on the song Time. Time's written about Nate's wife. And what Nate does on this song that I think is so different from any of his other songs is the way that he addresses matter-of-factly and with some motivation in his voice to change a lot of the. So he is addressing a lot of the issues in his life with this new motivation, right? Being married has put a real face to this motivation, because it seems that the reason of getting better for your fans isn't a good enough reason, right? They're too ambiguous of a reason, right? To motivate Nate to change. But a wife, someone who's in his life daily, is a ever-present reminder for Nate. So let's read Time. Got a lot of issues. I'm trying to work through them. Going to therapy for you something that's worth doing. When I know you've been there for me through all of my worst moments, and I know it hurts knowing that I carry this weight on my chest, making it difficult for me to open up and connect. A lot of regrets. I apologize for all of the stress. That's not what I meant to do. You know I love you to death. So again, having a wife in Nate's life is an ever-present motivation for why he can and should continue to change. If we look at Proverbs 18:22, it says, "He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord." So now let's look at the next song, Let Me Go. In Let Me Go, we can see Nate ask a lot of the same questions that he did in Mansion. But in this song, he's begging for fear to let him go. To let Nate leave the mansion and live a free life. So now if we look at Nate's journey sort of as like a progress meter. Okay, Nate starts this journey at a low point in Mansion. Okay, then he starts making progress in therapy session. He beats fear in Perception in Intro 3, and for the rest of that album makes even more inroads dealing with some of the issues in his life. Then fear returns back in Y and regresses him all the way even further back than he was back in Mansion. And so in Let Me Go, we see him reach back to a point of Mansion where he's asking important questions on how to fix some of the issues in his life. So let's read some lines in Let Me Go to see what questions Nate is asking. My chest feels like a blade's in it. Who put it there? I think they did it. Out the cell now, where am I headed? Am I hellbound? Will I find heaven? Will I feel better or just regret it if I let you go and find the 7 letters being freedom? If I let you go and find the 7 letters I've been looking for, it's like it's never ending. Open all the doors and let the peace enter. So these are the same questions that were asked in Mansion. Okay? But the last line is key. Nate's nervous about opening the doors up to the mansion, but he's very ready for those doors to be open, right? He's calling some things out in his own emotions that he's learned from this whole entire journey. So Nate at this point is not confused about who is currently living in his mansion. He's not confused about how bad they are. He's not confused on how no good they are for Nate. So let's continue looking at Let You Go. I should let you go. Hands are feeling cold. Just leave me alone. I just want control. I feel so exposed. Liars in my home. So Nate is acknowledging that the emotions in his mansion are liars, right? And if you listen to the song, what you'll hear is that in the lines "Leave me alone" and "Liars in my home," you hear fear in the background say "No, no, no," trying to deny that Nate's calling them a liar. So let's continue. They want me to hide. How can I survive? Change your state of mind. I should say goodbye. They want me to beg. They want me to plead. They want me to die. They just want me dead. They just want me hurt. Don't want me to live and don't want me alive. So if we look at fear starts to lose grip over us when we start to finally recognize and acknowledge fear for what it is, a cancer in our life. Okay? If we continue to make excuses for why we give in to fear, then fear just metastasizes. But when we start to acknowledge it for what it is, it loses grip on us. So the next 4 songs, Hate Myself, I Miss the Days, Like This, and Thinking, each talk about in different ways Nate's longing for a time back when fear wasn't around. And he also starts looking forward to a time where fear won't be around. The final song on the album, though, Trauma, is a similar culmination to the one in Therapy Session during the song Lost in the Moment. So this song, Lost in the Moment, was the first conversation that Nate and Fear ever had on a song. In Trauma, Nate's talking to two individuals in the song. So one of them is obviously Fear, right? He talks to Fear throughout the song, and the other one is the character that we talked about earlier, Hope. So let's look at the song Trauma. Grab my hand, I'm drowning. I feel my heart pounding. Why haven't you found me yet? I hold you so proudly. Traumas, they surround me, and I'd wish you just loved me back. So in this song, Nate's calling out to Hope. Okay, remember this whole conflict between Fear and Nate is that Nate needs to get away from Fear. But Fear won't let him leave the mansion. Fear keeps lying to Nate. He keeps using Nate's other emotions, anger, pride, regret. He keeps using these emotions to lie to Nate to keep him locked in the mansion. Okay? And now with Nate's newfound help, his wife, his therapist, we see Nate, these two new people to help him, bring hope to Nate. An emotion that can actually bring Nate out of the mansion and to freedom. And now with Hope's help, we see Nate return to a perception level of confidence, of comfortability, even though he hasn't defeated Fear. Now that he has help, he can bear some of the weight that fear brings him. And so now we're going to look at Clouds, where we see Nate put this newfound comfortability, newfound confidence to face Fear to the test. So on the song, on the Clouds mixtape, on the song Just Like You, we find Nate connecting with his fan base. And in fact, he's actually teaching them, okay, giving them real advice on how to deal with some out-of-control emotions, like fear and other emotions. So Nate talks as though his own problems are becoming his past problems, his past issues. He talks as though he's starting to master his issues. Okay, Nate is in this, through the Clouds mixtape, you see Nate starting to learn from the journey, starting to learn from his mistakes, starting to learn from the battles that he's had with fear. See, there's levels to learning, okay? And the highest level of the learning process is being able to actually teach someone what you've learned. That's called mastery. On the song Lost, Nate is able to plainly talk about and break down his past struggles, what they were, how he dealt with them, while also giving advice on how to overcome these struggles, right? He's not just wallowing in his own sorrow. He's not just wallowing in his past. He's actually teaching people how to move away from that past, how to move forward from that past. This is a much more mature Nate on the Clouds mixtape. He's a lot more sober. He's a lot more able to sober-mindedly look at his life. So on the Clouds mixtape, I think the most important song on the album is called Drifting. We see Nate in Drifting call out to Hope again, and then he also sends a prayer to God, the ultimate version of hope. So let's look at the first call to hope. Let's see what Nate says. I see you in a distance, asking me why I'm so distant. I'm convicted. I'm convinced that I predict that all my wishes on my wish list won't be heard, because I'm committed to the lie that feeling safe is unrealistic when I'm drifting. So we see that Nate is calling out to hope again. He's moving a little closer to hope. And what's cool what's cool to see when you move closer to hope, or when Nate moves closer to hope, the more clarity, and this is the more understanding he has how to overcome his struggles. So let's look at the last verse of the song to see the prayer that he sends to God. So he asks God to tell Nate that he's worth it, give Nate more faith, and then the last line is key. Here's what Nate says. I have to innovate. The past intimidates, but I can't remain afraid. So now we're going to get to my personal favorite part of the story. Okay, this is where we get to the culmination of this journey. The point where we finally get to hear from this new character, Hope. We get to hear what his mission is, who he is, why he's here, and we're going to look at the first song on the album called Hope. The song is also called Hope. So let's dive in. This is actually Nate addressing first in these first few lines. Nate says, "Hope, I'm on my way, I'm coming. Don't lose faith in me. I know you've been waiting. I know you've been praying for my soul. Hope." So now Nate, at this point, on this first song of the album, is fully committed to finding hope. He's out of the mansion, and he's looking for hope. In the music video for the song, it opens with Nate on a raft in the middle of the ocean. But what instead you see on Nate is he's not dressed in Fear's black clothes. Okay, if you remember back in when we talked about the music video for the song The Search, somebody put white clothes in Nate's cage. And on the song Hope, Nate is finally wearing those white clothes. So we see a Nate who, instead of giving into fear, is now giving into hope. He's letting hope take control of this album. So let's look at let's listen to Hope now and what Hope has to say. So here's Hope on the song that's talking. 30 years you've been dragging your feet. He's addressing fear. Telling me I'm the reason we're stagnant. 30 years you've been claiming you're honest and promising progress. Well, where's it at? I don't want you to feel like a failure. I know that this hurts, but I gave you your chance to deliver. Now it's my turn. That was addressed to fear. That fear had his chance and failed. Now, in the second half of this first verse, we're going to see Hope address Nate. So here's Hope. Don't get me wrong, Nate. You've had a great run. But it's time to give the people something different. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my album, Hope. So if you remember back in the Why song, we talked about how Fear's mission, Fear's definition of success was to get Nate to always second guess himself, right? To never trust his instincts and to keep him from being the person that Nate wants to be. In this song, Hope responds to that question, what's your definition of success? By saying Hope's definition of success is standing up for what's right, trusting in your instincts, confidently being a creator, boldly being a creator, someone who does what they love even if it's at the cost of profit, and someone who's resilient even when they fail. It's the complete polar opposite of fear. Fear is someone who wants to stay stagnant. Hope is someone who wants to move forward. See, these two things are incongruent with one another. They can't exist in the same space, right? If we're going to look back in the mansion, hope and fear can't exist in the same mansion together. There's not enough floors in the mansion for both of them. So someone is going to have to leave, and that very statement is exactly the premise. Hope and Nate, Hope speaking through Nate, versus fear. So we started this song on a raft, and in the video, the raft finally makes its way ashore. And Nate pulls out a map to find Hope. But on the island waiting for both Hope and Nate is Fear in all black, trying to mess with Nate, trying to lead him in all the wrong directions. Pointing, even though Nate's looking at a map, Fear's pointing Nate in the wrong directions. And in the song, Nate sings about how things have changed since the last time Fear and him fought. Let's hear Nate. It's amazing what a little bit of faith can do if you don't even believe in you. Why would you think or expect anybody else that's around you to? I done did things that I regret. I done said things I can't take back. Was a lost soul at a crossroads who had no hope, but I changed that. So Nate continues to talk in this verse about how far he's come. And eventually, Nate doing all this talking frustrates Fear, and Fear gets tired of listening to Nate basically trying to take a victory lap. And what Fear does is pushes Nate into a building. And inside the building, during the music video, when Nate's pushed in it, we hear an old familiar chorus from the song Mansion, back in Nate's first album. We hear familiar words. My mind is a home I'm trapped in, and it's lonely inside this mansion. So fear, the building that fear pushed Nate into, is back inside the mansion, right? Remember, Nate left the mansion to go find hope and freedom, and now fear's pushed Nate, who's now being led by hope, back into the mansion. And if I can overthink this song a bit more, I think what we see here is fear recognizing that he's fighting a losing battle on the island, right? And now fear's deciding to take the fight to a place where he's comfortable, right? A home he's more comfortable in. And visually, this is a really cool thing visually, because in the Mansion song, when it came out, there wasn't a music video for the song, and so now Nate gets to take us through the mansion with him, right? We actually get to look inside what some of these rooms are in the mansion. In the first room that Nate shows us, we see Fear sitting in a room surrounded by black balloons, just saluting Nate. Okay. And so what Nate does is quickly close the door, kick back some of the balloons, and leave. Opening the second room, we see a cage. The cage that Nate used to lock himself in. Okay? And inside the cage is an older version of Nate with a black smile and the keys in his hands. Okay? Because if you also remember, back in the Mansion song, Nate talks about how he thinks he's locked in the cage, but God's already told him he's not locked in, right? Back in intro 3, Nate talks about that he thought he was in prison this whole time, but Nate was the one actually holding the keys. That's all been a lie. So this older version of Nate, what I think represents, this is the version of Nate that never lets himself out of the cage. This is the Nate that never allows himself to grow. This is the Nate that gets too comfortable in fear, too comfortable in the mansion, and he just grows old inside this cage, always controlled by fear. So while going through these two rooms, Nate sings about how, though the growing pains that he went through were difficult, he needed those pains to help him heal. This is what Nate says. If I'd never hit rock bottom, would I be the person that I am today? I don't believe so. Nate then tells us a new motivation, a new person to help him change. His son. This is what Nate says. Sometimes you gotta be someone you're not to hear the voice of reason. Having kids will make you really take a step back and look in the mirror. At least for me, that's what it did. I wake up every morning and pick up my son, hold him in my arms, and let him know he's loved. Standing by the window, questioning if Dad's ever going to show up. Is it something he's going to have to worry about? Don't get it twisted, that wasn't a shot, Mama. I forgive you. I just don't want him to grow up thinking he'll never be enough. So we see that becoming a father has given Nate the greatest motivation to change. Even saying, Mama, I forgive you. Remember back in How Can You See Me, we saw a bitter Nate who was angry with how his mom passed away. So what Nate is showing us up to now is that in order to master what's inside of us, we first have to ground ourselves into something outside of ourselves, something greater than ourselves. Nate has two things that he grounds himself in. He grounds himself in his new family, his wife and his son, and he grounds himself in God. Right? Remember back in the song, when we were talking about who our protagonist was, back in the song All I Have, Nate says this, I stand behind these words, I'm a Christian, but I'm not perfect. So now we find fear again in another losing battle. So what does he do? He does the same thing he did last time. He changes the battlefield. He changes the location to a high cliff. This is almost fear trying a last-ditch effort to get Nate to jump off the cliff. Okay, and then this setting is the final battle, this cliff top, Because what Nate does next is that he lists every single way that fear's hurt him for the last 30 years. So Nate he says 30 years of running, 30 years of searching, hurting, pain, fearful, anger, empty, shame, broken, anguish, hopeless, never, 30 years of never, 30 years of maybe, 30 years of later, fake, hollow, sorrow, darkness, sadness, stagnant, chains, 30 years of chains, anguish, suffering, torment, bitter, lonely, 30 years of pushing everyone away. And in between some of these lines, as Nate's saying them, you can hear fear in the background say, "Hey Nate, wait." In a sort of like, let's not be rash, in a sort of like, hey, don't do anything crazy sort of manner. After Nate lists these things, fear lashes out one last time. So the final verse of this song is a shouting match between fear and Nate. Nate, who's being led by hope. Now during this video, we get to see during the music video of this song, we get to see a incredible visual effect that takes place. When Nate's talking in this last part, he just looks like normal Nate with white clothes on. And when fear talks, the collar of Nate's white shirt starts to turn black, and a black smile starts to leak across Nate's face. So let's read this confrontation between these two. Starting with fear. "You'll never evolve." Then Nate. "I know I can change." Fear. "We are not enough." Nate. "We are not the same." So Nate is finally separating his identity away from fear. Fear. "You don't have the heart." Nate. "You don't have the strength." Fear. "You don't have the will." Nate. "You don't have the faith." Fear. "You'll never be loved. You'll never be safe." And these two things have already been proven false, right? Nate's already been loved and secured by his family, right? He feels safe with his wife. He feels comfortable with his wife, okay? He's already loved by his wife and by his son. Fear. "You might as well give up." Nate. "I'm not running away." Fear. "You don't have the guts." Nate. "You're the one afraid." Nate's now turned the tables on fear, saying, "I'm not the one afraid, fear. You're afraid, and why?" Fear. "I'm the one in charge." Nate. "I'm taking the..." And before he finishes that sentence, you hear fear scream out in desperation, "No. No." Nate. "I'm taking the reins." What was fear afraid of? Fear is afraid of losing control over Nate. And this is thanks to the help of hope, right? Hope's help, again, loosen the grip that fear's had on Nate. And now, Nate's defeated fear, definitively defeated fear. And it's not so much that fear is now non-existent, right? He'll always exist back in the back of Nate's mind, but it's more that fear's been replaced in the mansion. He's been replaced by who? By hope. And in one line on the song Pandemonium on the Hope album, you can see that Nate even notices the difference within himself. So here's the line. "Something special about me, you can already tell the energy is different. Confidence is at the highest level, I don't ever see it dipping." And as was the case back in Intro 3, throughout the rest of this Hope album, Nate sings and raps like a free man, a man who doesn't have the chains of fear holding him back. And this time it's only more so. And how can we tell? Well, it's because Nate starts to actually resolve some of these past issues that he wasn't able to fix in earlier albums, starting with his relationship with God in the song Happy. So the song Happy is written like a letter to God. So let's look at Happy and see what Nate says. "Dear God, please hear me out. I know it's been a couple years since I've reached out and said hello. I bet you're wondering why I keep obsessing on and stressing all the little things, when I should be living life and soaking up the memories. I know I've been selfish, and I have no excuse to give you its true. So we see Nate take accountability for his own actions, for his own backsliding away from God, and we see a desire throughout the rest of this song for Nate to rebuild that relationship, acknowledging that he needs God to pull him out of this hole, pull him out of the mansion that he's trapped in. Not actually trapped in now, right? Hope has led him in and out of the mansion, but he needs God to keep him out. So we look at the song Bullet now, and we see another song written to his wife. And I think this song is one of the best songs I've ever heard a husband write to his wife. So let's look at some of these lines. Words will never be enough to describe the way we both connected when you had our baby. I'm proud of you. I can't believe it. It still fascinates me. Watching us grow, seems like yesterday we met. Life is flying by, makes me emotional just talking about it. Got a lot of memories. Things I can never forget you gave me. Life when I was on empty and I was going crazy. Stood by my side. It's only right that I return the favor. You changed my life and gave me love when I had none to offer. Gave me hope when I was hopeless. Ain't no second thoughts. If it came down to me or you, I swear to God that I would take the bullet. So we see Nate acknowledge how much of a positive impact that his wife has been in his life, and how much that impact has only grown Nate's love for her, acknowledging that no matter what, if it came down to it, Nate would give his life for his wife. So then there's, later on this album, the big resolution, right? So the song Mama is obviously about his mother, and it's a beautiful song about finding closure for Nate's mother's passing, right? Remember, again, we talked about how on How Could You Leave Us, Nate was bitter and angry. And this is the response to that song, the sequel to that song. And I think this song best shows how far as a man Nate's come. The premise of this song is Nate asking his mother what heaven's like. So let's read the song Mama. I gotta know, Mama. Did he show you some grace? Give you a pass and tell you he would carry the weight? Do you smile more? Wonder what it's like when you pray. Is he standing in front of you so you can look at his face? When you talk to him, does he talk back? You ever have conversations about what you regret? Or did it all go away once you got there? Does each breath take you closer to God? Would you say that you cry less? Do you feel at peace yet? Do you laugh more? You feel like heaven is everything you could ask for? But the last lines in this song are the moment, I believe. So here's these last lines. Yeah, I'm grown now. Took me a while to see the bigger picture, because if you were here today and I was talking with you, there'd be a lot of tears of joy falling on my sweatshirt. Probably followed by some apologies and Mom, I missed you. Yeah, I pray you see me down here looking up. Still got a lot of things I need healing from, but I'll get there eventually. So don't you worry none. I just hope you finally get some peace and you feel happy. Mom, I love you. I love this song. This is probably my favorite NF song because, again, it shows how far Nate's come. And I always picture when I listen to this song that Nate in the booth when he asks his mother, I gotta know, Mama, did he show you some grace, give you a pass and tell you it would carry the weight? Do you smile more? Wonder what it's like when you pray? When he says those lines, I always picture Nate smiling into the mic, right? Imagining his mother with peace, imagining his mother resting finally in the amazing presence of God. And I always imagine that Nate is standing in the mic with his son and with his wife, hoping that his mom can see those three together and that Nate is a grown man who has finally overcome some of these issues. And with that song, After Mama, we reach the final song on the album, Running. We see the last conversation that Nate has with Fear and the mansion. And when we're going to read it, I want you to look at how interesting way that Nate speaks to fear. So let's read. I'm tired of holding on to you. It's time to let go. It's time to let my pride go and learn to love myself again. I don't want to wait another day. I've waited long enough. I'm ready. I can see the sun. It's coming up. There's happiness on the horizon. I'm hopeful I can see the light. I've hesitated all my life, but I'm all done. I'm done running from you. Spent my whole life in your shadow, scared of who I'd be if I said goodbye and I didn't have you here. I wish you well, but I can no longer stand aside and watch you sabotage the two of us. I love you to death, but I can't spend the rest of my life in this darkness. I'm done. I'm done. So we see in running that Nate is talking to fear almost with sympathy, with empathy. He says, I love you to death, right? You'd think if you were talking to someone that you were enemies with for so long, that what you'd say when you're finally getting away from them isn't, I love you to death. But for Nate and Fear, I mean, they've been together for so long, it's hard to say goodbye, right? Remember, Nate has had trouble for all the albums picturing what his life would be like without Fear. And this sympathy and empathy gets even deeper in the final verse. So let's read the final verse of this journey. I love you, but not enough to allow you to continue to drown the both of us. You're holding me back. You're pulling me down. You're making me hate myself. I don't want to leave, but that's what I need. I ain't got a choice. I can't just let you deceive and make me believe that I don't deserve to be loved. I am not going to stand aside and watch you attempt to rob and steal and sabotage what little faith I have left. Haven't I sacrificed enough for you? I hate seeing you cry, but I think it's time to let go and say our goodbyes. Yeah, I'm going to miss you, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life running. What's Nate going to miss about Fear? I think what Nate's saying when he says, I'm going to miss you, is that he's going to miss the comfort, the ease that came with staying locked inside of the mansion instead of addressing those problems. I mean, let's look at this entire journey. This has not been an easy journey for Nate by any stretch of the imagination. Nate's been at the point of suicide. Nate's been questioning himself the entire way. Nate's been lied to. Okay, Nate's had mental breakdowns, right? His emotions have gotten the best of him over and over and over again. Nate's had to struggle this entire journey. So he's going to miss the comfort of the mansion. But at this point in running, he recognizes just how toxic that relationship with Fear was and how much it was killing Nate. Nate sees the full picture, and he didn't figure this out by himself, remember. He has his wife, he had a therapist, right? And now at this point, with his wife, with his son, with a renewed relationship with God, and now a hopeful outlook on the future, now living in freedom, now Nate can once and for all say goodbye to the house that he built, say goodbye to fear, right? Say goodbye to the fear of what will come after he opens those doors of the mansion. And now Nate can once and for all say hello to a life of freedom.